guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the books that I've read so far in 2025. And although I've always been a reader, this is the first time this year that I'm really reading with lots of intentionality, and that I am definitely my most consistent. My goal is to read one book per month, which doesn't sound crazy. I know people are reading 4 books per month, yet they're reading 54 books a year, but it doesn't really suit my lifestyle or the purpose of reading. Obviously, I read because I just love to be absorbed in other people's lives and worlds, and I mostly read fiction, and I truly believe that fiction can teach you so much about life because you're not constricted to what has happened, but then it opens up the possibilities of situations that you might be in the future, that may arise in the future. I also read a book because I want the book to be a marker for a moment in time, a feeling in time, and I want to leave along the books that I'm reading. It's truly a matter of, like I said, living alongside a book, looking back at a book and being able to identify a period in my life, a milestone in my life, a feeling, a heartbreak, a celebration, a moment of peace, a moment of transition. I'm really selective about the books that I read, and it's almost, I'm curating the books that I read, and it's almost reflective of curating a certain soundtrack to my life. I'm really intentional, and this is why my goal is to read 1 book per month. But I've been on track, honestly, to I've been reading a book and a half per month, because some books are just just so good and really easy to just read through them. So at the beginning of the year it was a book per month, but now I'm at a pace of a book and a half. We're going to talk about the books that I've been reading so far, and honestly I haven't had too many disappointments, so let's get right into it. The first book I read in 2025 was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, and I already made a whole review about this book, so you guys can definitely check it out on my page. But spoiler alert, I loved this book, and I revere Toni Morrison's writing. I'm a huge fan. This was my, pretty much, even though I had been exposed to her via people talking about how great she was or how she was their favorite author, I had never had a personal connection to her, but this was my first book ever that I've read of hers, and it was wonderful. I loved this book, and I felt so lucky to have started the year reading this book. Even though it's a very heavy read, I felt so creatively enriched. And I also want to add that this is literally one of my favorite books now, definitely in my top 10 must read. The second book I read was Sula. I was drunk off of The Bluest Eye, and I really was such in a hurry to just read all of her work, but so I picked up Sula. And to be honest, I'm sort of suspicious of my feelings towards this book because it doesn't align with the ways in which everyone else loves this book. I just really didn't connect with it the way I connected with The Bluest Eye, and maybe I went in with too high of an expectation, despite everyone saying that they loved the book. I mean, I read this book at the heel of having read one of my favorite books ever, so I was definitely always naturally going to compare this to The Bluest Eye, and I'm not sure if that's a fair assessment. I also have to trust in my instincts. I didn't like this book. I didn't love this book. There were some parts that I enjoyed reading, like Toni Morrison is a great writer, but I went in with the best of intention. I went in with the expectation of loving this book just as I had The Bluest Eye, and so I have to trust my instinct and trust that I did not like this book as much. But Sula is a story of a community in Medallion, Ohio, and that community exists in the story within the context of racial discrimination and within the context of the tragedies that happen or occur within it. And Sula, our titular character, she's sort of an outsider of this community by way of the choices she makes, versus her friend Nellie is more aligned with expectations of a young Black woman, and they're sort of like our anchor and our eyes into this community as the story moves along. But it's very heavy, very tragic. I thought it was heavier than The Bluest Eye. The third book I read was Dream Count by Chimamanda Ngozi. Sorry, noise outside. But yeah, the third book I read was Dream Count by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and I did not enjoy this book. I think out of all the books I read so far this year, this was my least favorite. I was definitely seduced by, you know, very well written sentences and rich and just charged with so many emotions, but overall the story wasn't that good. The reading experience was very boring, I would have to say. I really tried to make it to the end of this book, and although it's a work of fiction, it didn't feel widely or even slightly imaginative. The story centers on the lives of 4 women whose lives are intertwined: Chiamaka, Zikora, Omologo, and Kajatu. For some reason or another, they each have a place in each other's lives, and so we see them interact with societal expectations of them as Africans, but also as women. We see them interact with, you know, relationship, romantic ones, also parental relationships. They are also engaging with the American judicial system or the American school system. We know Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She's a pretty popular figure, and we're very, I guess, knowledgeable of her opinions about society, which are very strong. And so I felt like these characters were almost a mouthpiece to all her grievances against society. It wasn't nuanced the way I feel like a work of nonfiction would be. With fiction, you know, a character can believe in whatever, and because they are not real people, they have some leeway to believe in whatever they believe in, or to say whatever they feel, without us having to truly sit on it, because they are not real people. And I feel like Chimamanda was using these characters to just grieve the opinions that she had about society. So in that aspect, I didn't feel like it was imaginative, because the characters were not all they could be. And sometimes, even as a writer, you have to let the characters speak, and it felt like Chimamanda was speaking for them. It wasn't a good story. I think there were definitely some chapters and some women's stories that felt more fleshed out. Like, I would say Zikora could have been a short story on its own and really interesting, but even the men in this, they're one-dimensional. They don't really have a life outside of being there for the purpose of proving a point. I mean, I love Chimamanda's writing. I really loved Purple Hibiscus. That book changed. It just changed everything, because it was the first book that I read when I sort of dived back into reading for pleasure. I really enjoyed Half of a Yellow Sun. Those are 2 books that brought me to tears, and so her writing can be impactful. But she did mention that this was the first work that she was able to even, you know, write as a whole. She had been suffering from like a huge long bout of writer's block, and so I feel like, you know, sometimes you just have to put something out there to sort of like get out of that writer's block. But definitely not her best book. not a book I would recommend. The next book I read was Agua, Viva by Clarice Lispector. I had no idea who this author was, but it's a book that I just happened to always sort of like interact with. I would see people talk about the book, always a book that came up, and so I was very intrigued. And it's a short read, but very impactful. It's hard to and this is always said, but there's no plot. It's sort of like a stream of consciousness. The character, and it's written in the character's voice, first person. The character was a painter who turned to writing, and the whole book, it feels like a letter to someone, and she's speaking to him, and she's just saying the first thing that comes to her mind. But the reason I think it's so easy to connect with this book is because she is truly trying to get to the root of what is life and get to the root of the present moment. How do you grasp the present moment when after a second it's already become the past? And because it's a stream of consciousness, she's not corrupting her thoughts, and what that creates is a stream of thought that we all have. We're always filtering our thoughts, but these are really unfiltered thoughts. And obviously the book was edited and stuff, so she didn't just write the book and then it's ready for to be published. But I think that I truly loved the way she is, like, you can see her frustration trying to get to the meaning of life, trying to grasp what it means to be human, what it means to live in this world. And I really loved that. And there were a couple of quotes that I just really loved from this book. I want the impartiality of Mozart. I wonder if I'm giving you an idea of what a person goes through in life. And what is a window if not the air framed by right angles? I want the profound organic disorder that nevertheless hints at an underlying order. I know how to invent a thought. I can't sum myself up because you cannot add a chair and two apples. Something like a memory of a tall monument that seems taller because it is a memory. And I could quote more from this book because it is a stream of consciousness, and it deals with so many existential questions and feelings that we all have. And yeah, it's a very experimental type of writing, which as a writer, I think it's a blessing because it gives you permission then to experiment with writing in your own way. So, Agua, Viva. Next book I read was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, and this is such a treat of a book. I know this was my favorite book of this round of books that I've read. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. Again, did not know about the book. It wasn't a book that was on like my to be read shelf or anything, and I had no idea who Betty Smith is, and still don't. I need to definitely read more about her. But it's a book again that came up. I think that I meant to read this book a couple years ago but never really picked it up. But yeah, I live in Brooklyn, and there's something so special about being rooted in the place that you're reading about, and it just felt very timely with the summer. I could imagine myself being in Brooklyn at a park and just reading this book and really grounding myself in the present. And that's really what this book felt like. And I was sort of skeptical about reading this book because it's really about the white immigrant experience in early 20th century Brooklyn. So it wasn't like I was going in knowing that I would relate or feel something, but I definitely do. I researched this book to kind of determine if I wanted to read it. A lot of people said that it was their favorite book, that they've gone back multiple times, have read this book in different decades of their lives, and they're able to always like extract something new, some new meaning. And that really excited me, that again, like the whole idea of like living alongside a book. And I also met someone at a party recently who told me that she reads this book every September, and that's so cool. I hope that I find that book that I want to read every year. And honestly, this would definitely make the short list, because I loved this book. This tree that the title is referencing is a tree that doesn't need a lot to survive. It doesn't get any sunlight, and it grows in granite, and its struggle to survive is what gives it the strength to actually survive. And it's very reflective of the people in Brooklyn who lived in tenements. They didn't have much. They were very, very poor. And that, I think it doesn't glamorize poverty at all in this book. It's very descriptive, which I really loved. We explored their struggle with poverty and their struggle with just like immigrant life. The heroine of this book is Francie, and we follow her life and her family's life from her birth all the way to when she becomes a young adult. And although the story is not told in first person, the story is told through her perspective, and she soaks up the world around her, even though it's a very small world. And she has a very inspiring motivation for education, just pure out of curiosity. Even though it is a way out of poverty, her draw to it was really about learning more, and just being very curious about people and the world around her. Although this is not Sofia Coppola's version of girlhood, it is on a micro level. It is a story of girlhood. We watch Francie navigate her relationship with her mother, her relationship with boys, her relationship with mean girls at school, the relationship with navigating life, being poor, and the embarrassment of being poor. I think we don't explore that dynamic of like girlhood when you're poor, and the embarrassment of it. She also questions her beauty. She's curious about sex and about the older girls that she can see through her window, whose life feels so free compared to hers. I also really loved Katie, who is her mother. She has a wonderful relationship, very intimate, very relatable relationship with her sisters, Evie and Cece. I found it very striking and touching, the ways of her motherhood with so little resources, the way she's able to practice motherhood on basically nothing. I think it was very inspiring. And even the men are very interesting, very dynamic. They have lives of their own. Very well written books. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. Very raw, very specific. The latest book I read, and I finished this within a week and a half probably, it is Stillborn by Guadalupe Nettel. And honestly, never heard of this author, never heard of this book. Forgot to mention, this is actually translated from the Portuguese language, and this was also translated from Spanish, I believe. The author is Mexican. The story is about two friends, Alina and Laura, and they are friends who met in Paris, and they then both moved back to Mexico City. And they both were, you have the two types of women, those who want kids and those who don't. And they were always part of the women who didn't want kids. They always felt that was just part of a patriarchal system. It was an oppressive business, to get women pregnant and have them raise children. But one day Alina meets Aurelio and she changes her mind. She actually wants a child. And I think one of the beautiful things that happens is that you think that Laura is going to be upset and mad at her, and although she kind of feel some type of way, she's just so happy for Alina once she gets pregnant after trying different methods to conceive a child. And so Alina has a child, and well, she becomes pregnant, and she finds out that the child is going to be born with some disabilities, and not even born, but they were not even sure if she was going to live past birth. They told her that Alina's body was what was actually keeping the child alive. That paints a whole picture of motherhood that Alina wasn't ready or wasn't preparing for. And Laura herself, you know, she's the one who has the time to have all these philosophical, you know, thinkings about motherhood, but she actually gets really close with her neighbor's child while the child's mother is having a depressive episode. She's the one who steps in. I think the book really paints a real picture of motherhood, but also what does it mean to mother people without having any biological ties. And yeah, I think it's really beautiful for people to step in other people's lives. It truly takes a village to raise a child. See all these women really stepping in for each other, which I thought was beautiful. I really love this book cover, and I love the title Stillborn. Stillborn, the duality of that phrase. Stillborn, you know, you're born but lifeless, or but then stillborn, you're still born. I think it's really about perspective, as everything is. And I'll definitely have a part 2 of the books I've read. I think we have 6 more months to go, so end of the year I will definitely update you guys on the 6 or 7, 8 more books that I've read this year. And yeah, but so far this is my favorite one. Alright guys, thank you for watching. As always, I'm really glad that I sat down and made this video. It's a video that I'm always thinking about making, especially because the last sort of like book vlog that I made, I truly loved that one. So I'm truly happy that I filmed this.